all right, the former UK Parliament member John Browne says it's not so much of those who come here, but those who could potentially sneak in here, because up north in Canada, they are letting them in at a fairly frenetic pace here. And that worries you, John, right? That that border with Canada is much more open and porous than our border with Mexico. And a lot of those guys, particularly the ones you fear might be dicey, could come into the United States. Explain.
Well, of course, the left wing always have policies that sound nice and are very goody-goody, but they're often totally irresponsible, as I think this is, because it only requires not thousands, but just 5, 6, or 10 people to get in to cause mayhem, which the Paris talks terror incident may only be a rehearsal. And Canada is already in counter-IS operations in Syria, so it's a target, as Abu Mohammed al-Sham said, kill all Canadians. And also, if France, which is now rumored, may invoke Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which means mutual defense, as America did after 9/11, that means Canadians are going to have to fight in Syria if that leads to that. And so it's going to further endanger Canadians, and as you rightly point out, Neil, via a very porous border, American citizens, endangering them and overstretching security services and increasing vastly security costs, which means more debt, more borrowing, and so on. I think it's totally irresponsible myself.
You know, John, the argument is that the vast majority of these seeking asylum in any one of these free countries are legitimately seeking asylum. But again, it's not like the old days when my parents and grandparents came into this country, in the case of the Italian side, through Ellis Island, where there was someone to vouch for them here, someone who would pick up the tab for them, someone who could vouch that they were safe and welcome, and there were friends or family or connections here. And we also knew where they came from. We knew where, for example, in my case, in Italy, where they were from, their background there. But there's very little of a paper trail here, and there's very little in way of family or friendly communication or links here. So it's a whole different ballgame, right?
Absolutely. You hit it right on the head, Neil, and that is the problem. It only requires so few. These terrorists are dedicated. They're prepared to give up their lives. They're not just on suicide mission, but suicide terror. And now with bombs attached to themselves, explosive vests and Kalashnikovs, they're even more dangerous than before. And the fear is that the incident in Paris is merely a rehearsal. And it just shows how much damage can be done by very few people at very little cost. And I think the opening of borders is totally irresponsible. I think Angela Merkel in Germany is running a severe risk already, and you never hear about it in the media. Supermarkets are being overrun, sacked and overrun and smashed up. And there's huge grassroots feeling in Germany, and it could endanger Angela Merkel's continuation
No, I mean,
as
she had
Chancellor.
even said that we have to still allow those who seek asylum and need asylum to have asylum, and she's being rejected by her German citizenry who says no, no, no. So then I'm wondering, John, where did these upwards of 4 million largely Syrians, go? I mean, right now we've got them in camps between borders, between Croatia, between Slovenia, but by and large they're in camps without a home. And I'm wondering, the more and more countries that are leery to accept them, what happens to them?
Well, my fear is that if they're allowed into these countries and incidents occur, there will be internment within the countries anyway.
Well, we already see what happens at the border now. Before these Paris incidents, it was getting pretty violent, as a lot of these refugees, many for good reason, are getting impatient, they're getting exasperated, and some of them are getting hungry, to put it mildly, depending on what border town they're at. So you got to wonder how this sort of, devolves here.
Well, I think, of course, it all devolves from a complete lack of leadership by President Obama, and now the leadership, it looks like it's being seized by President François Hollande of France. And as I say, if he invokes Article 5 of the NATO treaty, then we're all going to have to be involved in active fighting in Syria. The biggest danger is that Russia is defending Assad, and that could lead to NATO facing Russia in Syria, which is very serious. But when you have a president who, even yesterday after the Paris incident, almost refused to say radical Islam, almost accepted no responsibility, and will continue the non-strategy that we have at the moment, which is leading and magnifying this problem.